Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. And our guest today is Sara Lohse, and she is from Favorite Daughter Media, and which is a marketing agency dedicated to helping mission-driven businesses and creators use their outside voices, which is so interesting just to hear that in the description. But welcome, Sara, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I am a podcast guesting coach. So I help people grow their businesses through strategic podcast guesting. And I do it in a way that really takes into account the experience of the hosts and the producers because I've been on that side of this for so long. So I really try to get people to lean into what their story is and where their value is and use that as a message that's going to elevate their business.
Yeah. So yeah, I love this topic. Obviously, I have my own podcast and I'm guest on other people's as well. So tell me first of all, what's the value of being a guest on a podcast?
There's so much value. It is, especially, I think it's valuable for small businesses and people like coaches and entrepreneurs that are just getting started because there's not really a budget that needs to go into it. So it can be a very affordable marketing tool. But when you think of it as a marketing tool, you can actually end up losing the value with it. So you have to be careful. But it's a way that you can spread your story, and it's a way that you can reach new audiences and reach a potentially global audiences. People all around the world are listening to podcasts. And if you have a story and a message that can resonate with them, it's a way that you can build trust, reach those new audiences and get them to want to learn more about you because they've already heard what you have to say, they trust you, and they're already intrigued.
All right, yeah, I love that. So what is there a wrong or right way to be a guest?
Absolutely. There is definitely a wrong way to do it. I think a lot of people, at least from what I've seen in my experience, they take a very transactional approach to being a podcast guest. So I get this opportunity to have a 30-minute free ad spot for my business. So I'm going to go on and just promote my business because that's what I'm here for. But that's not what you're here for. You are here to bring value to the show. You're here to deliver value to the listeners, deliver value to the host, and make it just a great experience for everybody. So I think going into it thinking like, okay, I'm going to start marketing, it's not really the best way to do it. You should go into it thinking, I want to build connections. I want to build relationships. I want to be a thought leader in this topic. And when you do that, and when you do it with respect for what the host is doing and what the producers of that show are trying to do, you're going to come out with a much better episode, and you're going to get a lot more attention. So going in with just a value first approach and really sharing some great insights, some great information, and your story and who you are and why this topic is important to you, that's really the best way to do it.
Yeah. And so how can you, so those that are obviously using the podcasting as a marketing tool, how can they still convert, listeners without a sales pitch? Like they're given that value. So how are they converting listeners?
Yeah, so that's something that is really easy to do on the spot. It just takes some legwork ahead of time. So the best way to convert from a podcast is to use a lead magnet. And that is a piece of content that is highly valuable that someone can download for free from your website. And it's something that they're going to want. So I've seen these used with planners and checklists, ebooks, webinars, whatever it is. It's a very valuable piece of content that kind of takes a next step above what your conversation was on the show. So it relates to what you're talking about, but just kind of goes more in depth. And when you go on the podcast, you can just invite people to continue the conversation with you, to learn more about what you're talking about, and go download that ebook or that whatever your lead magnet is. So if you take the time to create that piece and then create the funnels around it, so there's email capture funnels and lead generation tools that you can use. I've seen this work with thousands of people jumping into an email list within a week. Because we just got the right message on the right show, and people were really, really excited to go download that content.
Yeah, awesome. So what's the difference between, as far as generating leads, between hosting a podcast and being a guest on a podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of differences there with just kind of the approach to it. So, I mean, you know this as a host, you have episode after episode, season after season to cultivate your relationship with your listeners and to let them get to know you and to earn their trust. And as a guest, like right now, I have, I think, 15 minutes to connect with your audience. I have 15 minutes to show them that I am a thought leader in this space, that I know what I'm talking about, that I can help them in what I'm doing. Like I have that very small amount of time. So that's why I always recommend going in with this value first approach, because if you just go in with a sales pitch, you don't know me. So why would you trust me enough to reach out to me and purchase a product or engage a service? I'd rather spend this time just kind of helping them get to know me and start to trust me and see my value so that they do want to continue that. So it's a similar process. It's just so much more compact because you just have that 15-minute, 30-minute, 1 hour spot to really make the same kind of impact.
Yeah, I like that. So I would imagine that doing that is, being a guest, that you would really have to have a clear story to kind of share as well.
Yeah. I think kind of the first step is figuring out what that story is and how it relates to what you're talking about. One of the things I say often is information can be Googled. And so if I were to come on here with just a very general topic that's just facts and data, you can look that up. You don't need me. But what I can bring as a guest is my experience around that information and how that information has shaped me and my career and how I create. So going in with that story helps people get to know you instead of getting to know the information that they could have just looked up. So I think figuring out what that story is and finding the value in your story, it can be really hard to do. And it takes a lot of time just kind of sitting down with yourself. And it's almost like a little self-therapy session sometimes, but figuring out where the value in your story lies and how it connects to the message that you're trying to put out.
Yeah. So for you, what's your favorite story to tell to connect with people?
So I have a couple, and I'm not sure what's the rating on this show. So I can make sure I tell the right one.
Yeah, it's over 13 or whatever that rating is.
So there's a story that I like to tell because it's the story that helped me tell my story. And that story is when I was in my early 20s, I took a solo trip to Ireland, ended up in a tattoo shop, and got a very inappropriate tattoo completely by accident. I asked for an airplane. It did not look like an airplane. And that was forever a story that I told in bars and I told as a joke and as kind of a, like, here's just a quick little story at a party. But a couple years later, I was at a podcast convention and I met the host of one of the biggest podcasts in finance. And I was trying to get the host of my show on his podcast by presenting him as an expert in all things financial planning. And his response was, I don't want an expert. I want a cool story. So in that moment, the first thing that came into my head was the story of this tattoo. And I was like, okay, do you want to hear about the time I went to Ireland and got a tattoo of a penis on my arm? He did. He did want to hear that story. So I accidentally got myself booked on one of the biggest finance podcasts there are to talk about a really bad tattoo. But it wasn't until that experience and the way that he interpreted the story and all of the details around it, because I just went in with a very simple, I got a bad tattoo. But me and him had sat down and really went deep into the story. And it turned out to be a story of self-discovery and a story of figuring out that I was in a dead-end career and I was in a dead-end relationship and I needed to prove to myself that I could do something on my own. And that's why I went on a solo trip. and I came back and quit my job. I came back and quit the relationship. I came back and I moved across the country to chase a dream I didn't know I had before I left. And so there was actually so much value in that story. And there was so much experience, and there was so much that someone who is also in kind of a rut, they can listen to my story, listen how I got out of it, and they can take something from that. So what I thought was a ridiculous bar story was actually the story that changed my career.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that story. But I guess that we can see there like why stories are so valuable, because they can open up doors, they can help you kind of dive deep into topics. And like you said, it was wound up being kind of more self-discovery by sharing that story and what you went through during that time.
I think one of the misconceptions that people have when you talk about like going on a podcast, telling your story, or speaking at a conference and telling your story, is that you need to have a story that is traumatic or dramatic or sensational. And I have more, I would say more important stories. I have stories about great successes I've had in my career. I have stories about things with family. Like I have other stories and I could tell those, but this is the one that really helps people see me for who I am. And it's not a dramatic story. It's just a funny anecdote that happened to me when a couple years ago. So when you think about your story, I always encourage people to just think about that experience that makes them smile, that reminds them of a time in their life when they were excited about something, because that excitement is what's going to resonate with people. And that excitement is what's going to make people want to listen to you. So you don't have to be talking about trauma or anything negative, anything heavy, which you, of course you can. People have those stories and those need to be heard. But
Right.
if you don't have that, and I don't want people thinking that they don't have a story worth telling. It's just a matter of telling it in the right way and to the right people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we sometimes get tied up in the mechanics of a story, and we don't really look at, the other things like the enjoyment or the humor or, or even the seriousness or the things that people can walk away with. It's like, it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end type thing. So we kind of get caught up in the mechanics of building that story.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're thinking, people don't necessarily need to know the story from start to finish. They need to know the pieces that are valuable, and they need to know what insights can come out of it. Because I can tell you exactly what happened in Ireland and exactly how it all went down, but you don't need to know that. You got the gist and you got the fun out of it and you got the message. So it's really just how you frame it and how you, learning how to tell that story and how to tell the big stories and the little ones, I think is so valuable. And if you want to be a podcast guest, learning how to tell those stories is just a really, really great tool.
Yeah. So how do you help people that want to be podcast guests?
So I am a podcast guest and coach. So I sit down with people one-on-one and help them figure out what that story is that they want to lean into. And I help them figure out how to craft their message in a way that's going to be impactful. But aside from that, it's also figuring out where the value is, figuring out what their lead magnet could be and how they can convert listeners, and helping them set up the sales funnels and the lead generation funnels. And I actually recently launched a new service I'm really excited about that. I give them the opportunity to sit down with a fantastic podcast host and record a practice episode that is not released on an RSS feed anywhere, but we give you the files and you can share them and you can promote them and you can use them as kind of a media reel. But it just gives you that opportunity to practice what you want to do before going on that global stage. But it really just comes down to figuring out how to tell your story and how to be a guest that is kind of doing it the right way. Because we had mentioned there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And it can be hard. It's a different mindset. It's a mindset shift away from like, I'm a small business owner. I need to promote my business and I need to try to get clients because I have to pay the bills. But that's not what it's about. So kind of helping them reframe their mindset away from sell into more of a let's connect and build relationships. It's a hard change to make, but it's so important and it can really change things for you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So if you were to give, say, like a top tip for somebody getting started, kind of the first one or two steps, what would that be?
Getting started and being a podcast guest.
Yes.
First tip is figure out what the story is around the topic you want to talk about. So don't go in with just thinking about the topic and don't go in just thinking of a story. Think about where those two pieces meet. And then second is just make sure that you have a very clear call to action. So that's where those lead magnets come in. Buying a URL specific to it is helpful so that they can go directly to a page on your website and access that piece of content. And having that back end already set up. So doing the homework, creating the email funnels, and just knowing going into it that this is going to be your call to action. This is the one thing you want people to take away from it. And that's going to help you continue the conversation with them after the show.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So we're actually coming to the end of our time, and you have a free gift for our audience, right?
I do. Of course, I have my call to action. So I have to practice what I preach. So if anyone wants to learn more about lead magnets, I have a free ebook with 50 ideas for lead magnets to help you generate leads for your business. And you can download that at favoriteleadmagnets.com. And it will put you on my email list. I will not harass you with a bunch of emails, just a couple of fun things with more marketing tips. But I would love to continue this conversation and help you figure out what the perfect lead magnet is for you.
All right, awesome. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. You got a lot of lessons out of Sarah's suggestions today, and definitely visit her free gift and get that for yourselves. We're also going to have her website and her social media in our show notes, so take a look there so you can connect and continue this conversation with Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. And then guys, we will see you on the next episode. So thanks a lot for tuning in. Bye.